Let's be friends.
Have you not?
And here we go. Get this right. There we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Ambassador Wing. I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday night. And tonight, sorry for the rescheduling of the stream from last night, but I do have a good reason why, and I will go into that here shortly. But welcome to episode 1 of No Sequel November. And tonight, we'll be returning to the 1990s, specifically the year 1995, with our first installment of No Sequel November and the Denzel Washington Russell Crowe feature, Virtuosity. And if this is your first visit to the Ambassador Wing, welcome. I hope you enjoy this, whether you catch this live on Twitter or YouTube, or if you catch this on the replay. Make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you share this with your friends. And of course, absolutely, if you enjoy this stream tonight, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification so it goes ding ding whenever I upload or I go live. And I feel I owe you all a bit of an explanation. Why, Ambassador, did you have to reschedule your stream from last night to tonight? Well, I will do my best to keep this brief, but I will also do my best to explain fully what exactly happened. As many of you know, I have been dealing with a chronic health issue over the last 5 months, since July, roughly mid-July of this year. It has affected my work, it has affected my personal life, and it has affected my YouTube channel. All three things I do not enjoy, believe me. But yesterday, made a trip up to a IU University Hospital, and here in Indiana, that's where I live, for those of you who may not know, and met with a neurologist there. Gave him the full rundown of what's been going on with me over the last 5 months, and he's like, this sounds like this particular neurological issue. And there is a name for what's wrong with me. It is very rare. It does not happen very often, but it can happen. What I have is known as persistent postural perceptual dizziness. To give you all a brief breakdown of exactly what happened back in July. Most of you know I have back issues, and I was getting injections in my lower back to numb the sciatica nerve. Well, unfortunately, back in July, the pain specialist screwed the pooch. And ever since then, my balance, my strength in my legs has been off kilter. Haven't had the faintest damn idea what's been going on with me the last 5 months. Well, now we do. You might be asking, Ambassador, is this curable? Unfortunately, no. Is it fatal? By no means, no. Is it treatable? With medication, partially, yes. Is it fully treatable? Unfortunately, no. This is what we know. And now I know, and you know what I know. So that's why I had to that's why I rescheduled last night's stream. I had a very long day yesterday, and I wanted to bring you all a good review, a good discussion on Virtuosity. I didn't want to come in half dead, metaphorically speaking. I was exhausted beyond belief because it was a 6-hour trip, 5-hour trip, roughly. It was 2.5 hours there and 2.5 hours back. And by the time I got back, I was like, there's no way I can do this review tonight. So I was like, I'm going to reschedule and do it Saturday. And so here we are. Episode 1 of No Sequel November, discussing Virtuosity. So, Now that we've got that bit of housekeeping out of the way, we've got all the intro stuff out of the way, let's dig in. I first saw this movie back in the days of Blockbuster. This was a movie neither me nor Mother Ambassador went and saw in theaters. Just didn't seem like it was our cup of tea. But we decided just on a whim to pick it up off the shelf there at our local Blockbuster and brought it home and gave it a watch. And of course, it had Denzel Washington. We both like Denzel Washington. We'd seen him in the movie Glory. We'd seen him in some other things. And we're like, you know what? This seems like a good movie. Let's check it out. Got a chance to also watch it on network TV back in the old days when they would do movies of the night. Virtuosity was a movie of the night one time, I think on I think it was like NBC or ABC or CBS or one of those channels. So back in the day when they did movies of the week. And rather intriguing movie. And we'd like to me and Mother Ambassador were of the mind, what did they cut out and can we watch this without a bunch of commercials? Thankfully, thanks to Blockbuster, we were able to. And yeah, they did cut out some stuff. And yes, they did edit it for television. This sort of thing happens all the time. Not so much anymore because, well, TV stations don't do movies of the week unless it's like your local station or something. But this movie was rather interesting because it is almost a predecessor in certain ways to another movie that would come out 4 years later, specifically The Matrix, because this movie does deal with the elements of virtual reality, of the melding of man's mind and machine. It deals specifically with Denzel Washington, who was a former cop and now a convicted murderer. Though there is a very interesting backstory behind this. We also have an early appearance and performance by Russell Crowe as the character Sid 6.7, who is essentially a artificial intelligence that has been programmed to think with the mind of a serial killer. And I'll go a little bit further into Sid's character as the review goes on. But you have a pretty good leading cast and everything, and two good leading men. You have, like I said, Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. To the best of my knowledge, well, actually, no, because Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe would later go on to co-star in the movie American Gangster. I think that's the only other time these two actors that a lot of people know and love, myself included, have ever actually worked together. And this first outing for these two actors, we see a younger Russell Crowe that we are accustomed to, a rather slight of build Russell Crowe, a Russell Crowe who is portraying a character that is crazy. Okay, crazy is not the right word. Homicidal and sociopathic. Because what we learned about Sid is he was developed in a computer as an artificial intelligence program, but he was developed in a way which is rather unique. He isn't just a normal program. Essentially, what the programmer did with Sid is they raised him like a child that was exposed to some of the most horrific sociopaths and tyrants and murderers and serial killers that the world had ever conceived. You see a computer program where you have a computer generated image of a young Sid, and he's in a room and he's hearing speeches by Joseph Stalin and a certain angry German guy and John Wayne Gacy and just a legion of some of the worst individuals in the history of humanity. To say Russell Crowe's character is somewhat of he is a character you should not enjoy watching on TV or watching in this movie because he is a AI that has gone rogue and an AI that has been programmed to be a serial killer. But at the same time, his performance is very engaging. You almost become enraptured by Russell Crowe's performance as Sid 6.7. And there's a playfulness to his character, but at the same time, to him, it's all a game. Even when he gets out into the real world, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. But going a little bit into Denzel Washington's character, like I said, he plays a former cop who was convicted of, I guess the proper legal term would be manslaughter in the first degree. He was a very well respected and known police officer in the LAPD. This is where this movie takes place, is in Los Angeles, and he plays his character's name is Parker Barnes. And unfortunately, he unintentionally not only killed a mass murderer and a political terrorist named Matthew Grimes, but he unintentionally also kills a news reporter and her cameraman. And what we see at the outset of this movie is Denzel Washington's character, Parker Barnes, and another convict inside this virtual reality simulation, which they are testing to use to train the new generation of police officers. Now, the CGI for this movie, you have to remember, this was 1995. CGI was still a burgeoning technology for filmmaking. It wasn't perfected yet. But at the same time, for 1995, and I just watched this movie on DVD just a few days ago, or rewatched it for this review specifically, and I have to admit, it holds up on a 4K TV because that's the type of TV we have. We have a 4K player and a 4K TV, and even on DVD, this movie holds up very, very well with the CGI. Granted, it is very dated CGI, but for the time that it was made in, 1995, or well, roughly 1993, 1994, give or take, it holds up very well. Now, aside from Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe in this movie, we've got a fairly well-rounded cast. We have hang on one second. Pull this up if it will cooperate. There we go. Yeah, here we go. We've got Steven Spinella as Daryl Lindenmeyer, who was the computer programmer who developed SID 6.7. We've got William Forsythe as William Cochran, who is the police chief. For those of you who are fans of Star Trek, especially Deep Space Nine, we have Louise Fletcher as Elizabeth Dean as the Attorney General. She would later go on to play Kai Wynn, I think it is, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We also have William Fichtner, who makes an appearance early on in for heaven's sakes, he makes an appearance at the beginning of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. I think he's the bank manager that the Joker and his crew rob. We also have an early appearance by Kelly Cuoco as Karen Carter, the daughter of Kelly Lynch's character, Madison Carter. So, a fairly well-rounded cast, all things considered. And this movie was written and directed, if I remember correctly, was directed by Brett Leonard. Now, I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Leonard else has done, but give me just a minute. We'll find out. Come on. There we go. Okay, apparently he's had one Academy Award, 2 nominations for Academy Award, and one. Good on him. What the hell? Oh, for Pete's sakes. Not what I wanted. Go away. Let's see. Okay. All right, this guy has actually done a few movies that we he did Killer Clowns and from Outer Space in 1980. Did a little movie called The Lawnmower Man in 1992. So this is not his first foray into the virtual reality realm because The Lawnmower Man, if I remember correctly, is actually based on a short story by Stephen King, which actually was adapted into a feature length film. So, Mr. Laird, you've done some good stuff, this movie included. So, well done. But digging a little bit more into the movie itself, as I said in the description, what is virtual and what is real? This movie is, it does blur the lines to varying degrees of what is virtual, what is real, especially at the outset. And then we have the issue of Sid wanting to break free from his virtual prison. And I want to say hello to the chat, Mr. Ferris of Ferris Geeks World. It's good to see you. And Ferris says, I first saw this movie on a TV of the week after watching Gladiator in theaters. I will forever remember this movie where Russell Crowe went ballistic crazy or Joker crazy. Yeah, Ferris, that is very, very true. And Ferris, is good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you stopping in this evening. Hope you and the family are doing well. And I don't know if you necessarily celebrate, but all the same, happy early Thanksgiving. Gobble, gobble. So, but this movie does deal with the ideas of how far down the rabbit hole of virtual reality can you go before the lines are blurred, which is something that is which is a carried on idea in the Matrix films. The other question I brought up, and I'll also address this now in the description, and we'll dig a little bit into all of these because I don't want to do just a shot for shot review of the movie. That's not how I work things. You all know this by now. If you have tuned in on the regular basis to this for my reviews. Let me scroll down here just a minute. Oh, okay. Here we go. The other question is, and this leans more towards Denzel Washington's character, Parker Barnes, because not to go into full spoilers, but what happens is Barnes is unintentionally responsible for the death of his wife and daughter. Now, the interesting thing with this movie, and this is something that has been carried on and a few other movies, predominantly in the 1990s, is you have a very charming or very well-known leading man, and you also have a very lovely or very attractive leading woman, or wherever the case may be. You have that paradigm here in Virtuosity between Denzel Washington and Kelly Lynch's characters. However, they do not pursue or have any type of romantic relationship, and I honestly think that was a very good move. Now, you do have a couple of interactions between Parker Barnes and the daughter, Karen Carter, and she's rather interesting, kind of fascinated by him. She's never really met a police officer before. Granted, the in this particular instance, Parker is trying to recapture Sid 6.7, Russell Crowe's character, and she's just asking these really screwball, like, young. She's like a maybe in her early teens or her just before she hit the age of 13, young girl, and she's asking him all these kind of really odd questions, talking about baseball and stuff. And then she sees his gun, and she's like, "Is that a real gun?" And he's like, "Yes, yes, it is." And her mother, Kelly Lynch's character, is like, "Why were you in the car with him?" She's like, "He's got a gun. We were talking about baseball." And Parker's like, "Hey, we gotta go. We gotta go now. Sid's on the move." This movie is very much what you would consider a cat and mouse game. You've got Parker and you've got not Karen Carter, the mother's name. Hang on. Madison chasing after Sid because he is essentially playing out the same type of game in the real world. Now, the interesting thing with this movie is it also introduces the idea of Android technology because what we have here is Sid's creator is afraid that they are going to come in and shut down Sid's program. Sid is a very devious and a very resourceful program, and he actually learns of, I think, this technology. It's, I think, called nanotech androids. And essentially, what he does is he dupes this um, techie in the company in the LETAC unit. It's essentially the acronym is for like the Advanced Law Enforcement Division of the LAPD, and they grow this android, and Sid comes out. And the tech is like, what the hell's going on? Within 10 seconds, Sid has killed the guy, taken his clothes, and escaped. And the programmer, Lindenmeyer, he runs. Now you have a seemingly infant mind or a newly freed uh, artificial intelligence running amok in a nearly indestructible android body. Because here's the interesting thing about this: they show this early on before they actually grow Sid's um, android body. It can repair itself by consuming glass. Now, digging into one of the questions I presented in the description, are we as human beings inherently evil? Do we have the seed of evil in us, or do we become evil over the course of our lives? That's the question. Because this on the surface, a movie like Virtuosity could be just written off as a action police cop movie or something of that. But I think there's more. Honestly, I think there's more to it. And I'll bring Ferris as I see your comment here. This is a movie where I was first introduced to this one movie cliche: walking in a straight line with the Bee Gees movies music staying alive playing in the background. Soon I saw this again on Madagascar. Yeah, Ferris, I honestly, and I actually used that particular image for the thumbnail of Sid walking down the strip mall and everything to staying alive in that purple suit that he gets from the guy at the club. And Sid is, as I said, Sid is a very intriguing character. He's not one that we should necessarily like because he is essentially a AI that has been programmed to be a mass murderer. And throughout the course of the movie, he is trying to kill all of these people. And there's another part of this movie that I will get into that is somewhat pertinent to the current social and political landscape of the US now. And I might get in a little trouble. Y'all might not like what I have to say, but you know what? I hope we can at least agree to disagree, or at least be civil with one another here. At least more civil than Sid was to the guy that was at the studio in Los Angeles. The character of Sid presents this idea of, as I said, do we become evil? Are we born evil? Or if we're exposed to enough evil, do we become the evil that we have been exposed to? The end goal for a artificial intelligence like Sid was to create a pure sociopathic killer. As Sid says to his creator, can't change what I am. I am a killer. I enjoy killing. I enjoy torturing. I enjoy maiming. This is what I am. This is what you programmed me to be. I think that is a very intriguing concept for the simple fact that I think in all of us, there is the capacity to be bad, to be evil, but it is a conscious choice on our part to not do evil, to not be a purely bad person. But Sid relishes in it. He revels in his murders, in his killings, in his maimings, in his public spectacles. He enjoys it because he was programmed to enjoy it. But at the same time, he was exposed to people who were like this in the real world. Like I mentioned, with Stalin, with Hitler, with John Wayne Gacy, with a fictional character in the movie known as Matthew Grimes, who was a political terrorist. With all of the worst that humanity has ever created. And believe it or not, we've created some bad, horrible, horrendous, I would say evil people. Sid goes so far in this movie to actually taunt and try to provoke Parker Barnes because of the part of the program that exists within him that is Matthew Grimes. Not to mention, Parker is his most intriguing adversary. He's the one that's come the closest, or if not the most often, to capturing or stopping Sid. We see this early on in the film. And I encourage you, after this review's over and you've watched it, I encourage you, go watch this movie. It is well written, it is well acted. Yes, the CGI is somewhat dated, but at the same time, this movie does not lean heavily on CGI. It is an element within the movie because it has to be there. The story could not be told any other way. And I think it adds an added layer and depth and richness to the story. Parker is trying to stop Sid, but at the same time, he is trying to redeem himself in his own mind because he was the person responsible for his wife and daughter dying. And that brings me to my other point because you have such an intriguing adversary in the person of Sid 6.7. On the other hand, you have just an intriguing protagonist in Parker Barnes. This is a man who is a police officer, a well respected one. He specialized seemingly in capturing terrorists of many kinds, and he was very good at it. But unfortunately, he went up, I would say, against the wrong terrorist in this instance, in the person of Matthew Grimes. Unfortunately, Grimes captured his wife and daughter, hoping that he would throw Parker off. Mr. Grimes bet wrong, but unfortunately, when things went very badly awry with that particular operation. And we also see in this movie that Denzel Washington's character is handicapped. No, not fully handicapped. He still can function. He can still do all the things he does. But he has a prosthetic arm. A very high tech and advanced prosthetic arm, but at the same time, a prosthetic arm. This is a man who commands respect with the people that he knew from his law enforcement days, even though he is now in prison. Now, and that also leads to the question, was it right to put Parker Barnes in jail? Yes, he unintentionally killed two people. He committed manslaughter. But the other factor is this. Should that reporter and that cameraman have been there in the lair of a known terrorist in the first place? Now, we don't know the specifics as to why. The best guess we can make is that the network that this reporter worked for reached out to Matthew Grimes and said, "We'd like to interview you, get your perspective on things." Personally, I think that was a bad idea. What are you going to gain from interviewing a political terrorist? Not much. So, anyway, we got. Let's see, Ferris. One of my favorite things about filmmaking for the 90s sci-fi films is combining the practical elements with CGI. This movie, Independence Day, Men in Black, Starship Troopers demonstrate this technique. Yes, Ferris, it does. It does so very well. As I've said, you've got the blending of practical and CGI effects, particularly with the character of Sid 6.7. They borrowed, I think, a little bit from. I would almost say that Sid 6.7 is a successor to the T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day, in that he can almost self-repair himself. He's almost indestructible, but you have to do a lot of damage to his body to actually incapacitate him. I think, I'm not saying that Brett Leonard deliberately ripped off the T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day by any stretch, but I would say that there is some inspiration, let's put it that way, that was not taken but borrowed from that particular character. And the difference between the T-1000 and Sid are this. The T-1000 is a programmed killing machine with no emotion. Sid is a killer. I would not describe him necessarily as a machine grand. He has an android body, but he has been programmed with the personalities of multiple mass murderers, um, psychotic killers, serial killers, genocidal madmen, tyrants, all these things. He, however, is a individual driven by his emotions. The T-1000 is bereft of that. He has no emotion. He is a pure killer. That is his purpose. That is what he's meant to do. So, but at the same time, getting back to this idea of, is Denzel Washington's character, Parker Barnes, is he just trying to recapture Sid so that he can gain his freedom? Or is there a part of him that is trying to redeem himself in his own eyes or his own mind, and perhaps the eyes of his wife and daughter who are now in the hereafter? This is never definitively addressed. I think that is a little bit of a detriment to this movie. Granted, they are dealing with a lot of different elements in this movie. I mean, they're dealing with the case itself of trying to recapture or destroy Sid 6.7. But there are a few scenes that do lend credence to this idea of Denzel Washington's character trying to redeem himself. And I think that in and of itself is a rather intriguing idea. Because let's be honest, we have all made mistakes and errors and chosen the wrong path in our lives. It's true of all of us, myself included. Granted, we haven't necessarily caused the harm or the death of a loved one, like Denzel Washington's character has in this movie. But at the same time, we all carry around this sense or obligation of guilt or responsibility. And I'll share something with you all and everything. And this is something I have not necessarily hidden or whatever, but most of you know if back about a year and a half or 2 years ago, my mom's brother, my uncle, passed away. And I made a promise to him and to my mother and to other family members that I would be in the aftermath of their passing, I would be the one that would keep the family together. In this, I have been partially successful, but at the same time, I have been unsuccessful. But there's also another element to this. For a very long time, I carried around a lot of resentment and a lot of anger within myself, much like Parker Barnes does in this movie. He's angry at himself for allowing his wife and daughter to be killed. When you're a father and a husband, that's the last thing you ever want to happen. Now, granted, what I carry or what I did carry is not the same. But I carried around a lot of resentment for many years because I use that word deliberately. I hated my father's parents, my paternal grandparents. They were not good people. They were probably the most horrendous pair of people you could think of. And they did not adopt my father or his adopted brother or sister because they loved children. Their intention was to have someone to take care of them when they got old. I hated them for that. I also hated them for how they treated my mother in the years after my father passed away. But my dad's sister told me something once that helped me put a lot of things in perspective, and she's right. She told me, "Do not hate the dead, for they have gone on to their final judgment, be it good or bad. Love those around you, live for those who are still living, and let the dead be dead." It was a hard lesson for me. I would be lying if I said it wasn't, because it was. Because it's very easy to hold on to that anger, to that resentment, to that hate, rather than let it go. And in this movie, we see Parker carrying around the memory of his wife and daughter. And Sid says something very telling at one point in this movie. That's the thing about real life. No resetting, no saving. You just have to go on. And in that, Sid is right. That's the difference between the real world and virtual reality. In virtual reality, you screw up, pause, restart, reboot, move on. In real life, you can't do that. And Sid's character, at least in that particular moment, I think is trying to teach Parker Barnes, Denzel Washington's character, a very important lesson. You can't undo what was done. You can either learn to live with it or you can let it consume you. In a lot of ways, Parker was letting it consume him. It was turning him bitter. It was turning him angry. It was turning him resentful. He did not care about himself or anybody else except for maybe his best friend, who was the chief of police, played by William Forsythe. Let's see, Ferris. Have you ever heard this 90s song called Virtual Insanity by Jamiroquai? Actually, Ferris, I do know of Jamiroquai. That particular song, I can't say for certain, but the name of the group sounds um, is very recognizable. I know of Jamiroquai. They actually had a song on the soundtrack for Godzilla in 1998. So I'm familiar with their music. I don't dislike it, nor am I a huge fan of it, but I'm aware of them. That's one of my favorite 90s songs that predicts humanity's usage of virtual technology. Yeah, wouldn't surprise me if maybe they used that song for this movie. I don't know for certain. I didn't have a chance to do that much digging into this or anything like I wanted to. So, and I do apologize for that, Ferris, and to all of you who are watching this live or will catch this later on the replay. But this movie, as I said, it would be very simple just to write off as a dumb action flick. But movies like Virtuosity and Demolition Man, they, I think, present a much more intriguing and interesting discussion rather than just as a simple action movie. But th- the 90s, in a lot of ways, was, I think, in some ways, the movie industry's last big hurrah for really solid one off films. And that's hence why no sequel November. We'll be covering over the next few days. Never got a sequel. Didn't need one. Virtuosity was a one off and it has held up very well. That's why I wanted to discuss it. Just like Monday night, we're going to be covering another 90s classic with a actor that we all know and love, that, of course, being Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger, with the film Last Action Hero. And you might be asking, Ambassador, you've never seen Last Action Hero? No, I have not. But I want to give credit where it is due. It was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe a little longer, might have been a month or more. A face that you all have seen on here numerous times as a panelist, Mr. Zach Leary, sent me a clip of Last Action Hero. And I watched it. I was like, why did I skip this? Why in the world did I skip this? So, let's see. I'm not sure if this movie or The Quick and the Dead or No Way Back launched Russell Crowe's Hollywood career. Ferris, I would say it was perhaps a combination of all of the above. Now, granted, I've only seen clips of The Quick and the Dead. I've never seen No Way Back. But I would say his work in the 90s or the late 80s was stepping stones for Russell Crowe becoming the leading man that we know today. Now, granted, some of his choices lately were not the best, particularly as Zeus in Thor: Love and Thunder. But at the same time, he has gone on to do a lot of good films and subsequent over the last several years. Sorry, sometimes I just can't get words out. I mean, we know Russell Crowe from Gladiator. We know him from another film which I mentioned just a little while ago, and American Gangster. I mean, he's done some really good films, and sometimes he's done some stinkers. Thor: Love and Thunder. I'm sorry, a little bit of an aside, very briefly. Me and Mad Ambassador watched Thor: Love and Thunder, And for the most part, it was okay. Not great, not spectacular, not all bad. It was okay. But I have to be candid. Russell Crowe's performance as Zeus in this movie, he should have never taken the role. When you've got a guy who has done such memorable roles as this movie, Sid 6.7, and Gladiator, and American Gangster, and numerous more. I mean, okay, if I remember correctly, he was also in 310 to Yuma. And I think he played the let's see, Christian Bale played the marshal or the sheriff or wherever it was, and Russell Crowe played the outlaw. Russell Crowe Russell Crowe in that movie was a badass. For him to do a role like Zeus, Thor: Love and Thunder, it best is better to be forgotten. To be perfectly candid, I'm sorry. Comparing his role in this movie, Virtuosity, to Zeus, this is the stronger performance. This is the more well written performance. This is the better directed performance. And the same is true with Denzel Washington. For the most part, Denzel Washington has never, at least as far as I'm concerned, done a bad movie. Those movies might have underperformed more so than they should have at the box office. Yeah, that happens. Sometimes good actors do underperforming movies or do bad movies. Thor: Love and Thunder. But this was a good performance by Denzel Washington. This was a solid performance because his character was believable. You could empathize with Washington's character. He made you believe that he was this tortured police officer who was sitting in a prison cell consumed by his own anger and resentment and hate of himself. There's a scene in the movie between his character and Kelly Lynch's character, Madison Carter. She's a criminal psychologist, and she's doing a line of questioning with him, and she asks him, "Were you attracted to violence as a child?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, Saturday morning cartoons when the coyote got crushed or whatever by the roadrunner. He's like, I just laughed my head off. Got a little bit of a shudder. And I think that presents another interesting chance for a dialogue. Are we as human beings inherently attracted to violence? I think across the board that is true, but I think there are variations. Some of us might be more so attracted than others. I can speak for myself. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s watching all sorts of television shows and movies. Some very benign, some very horrific. When I say horrific, I mean violent, I mean bloody. Primarily the slasher films of the 80s and the 90s, Friday the 13th, the Halloween movies with Michael Myers, Nightmare on Elm Street, the list goes on. But I also watch a lot of comedies. Some of my all-time favorites, like with the Blues Brothers, the Airplane movies with Robert Hayes and Julie Haggerty and William Shatner and Leslie Nielsen. Big Trouble in Little China, which is a blend of comedy and action. Any of the Mel Brooks movies. That man is a legend. Absolute legend. I mean, Spaceballs, Blazing Saddles, all those movies. So, And I do want to say hello to the chat, a name I've not seen in a while, but good to see him. Scotty R37, good to see you, pal. People love USC. I dig RoboCop. I consider myself a civilized man, but I do dig a bloody movie. Let's see. I love visceral things, funny, scary, violent, sexy. Yeah, Scotty, very true. It's in our nature. It just depends on what we're accustomed to, what our personal preference is, and what just resonates with us. All very true. And it's funny that you bring up UFC and everything, Scotty, because there's actually a sequence in this movie where they are at a UFC event. This was like early UFC before it got really big. And you of course have that famous ring announcer Michael Buffer, and he's doing "Let's get back to the Rumble." Clean throat. So, but yes, Scotty, that is true. Russell Crowe, I mentioned this before you got in here, Scotty. Um, his character Sid 6.7 is a artificial intelligence program. Yeah, yeah, Scotty. I know what you mean. I know what I'm. We're on the same wavelength here, buddy. Um, he was programmed. He was, as it's described by Kelly Lynch's character Madison Carter. He wasn't programmed like the atypical artificial intelligence program. He was he was his development was almost like that of a child, that um he was exposed as a young child to all of these psychotic killers and genocidal maniacs and just some of the worst of humanity as I described it and everything. So not VHS long ago, probably DVD long ago. DVD ago. The funny thing is, Scotty, my mother ambassador still has a copy of this movie on VHS, but I was able to pick it up relatively inexpensively on DVD. So, but let's see, Ferris. It's really crazy to find out that Russell Crowe was the first choice to play Wolverine in the first X-Men movie before the role eventually went to Hugh Jackman. Yeah, Ferris, that is true. You know, the change of fortunes. So, yeah, Scotty, I would highly encourage you to do so. I mean, that's why I do these reviews and everything, to bring these movies some recognition and to bring them back into the public consciousness, because this is a movie that really actually, Scotty, I think you're right. It was Doug Gray Scott. It wasn't Russell Crowe. Now, it could be possible that Russell Crowe was in consideration for Wolverine, but Doug Gray Scott was the one that was ultimately cast, but unfortunately he got injured, I think, during the filming of one of the Mission Impossible movies, and the role did go to Hugh Jackman, obviously, as we all know. So, Ricochet, I'm not familiar with, Scotty, to be honest with you, but I'll do some looking into it. It sounds familiar, but it's not one that I'm super familiar with, to be honest with you. So, and Scotty, correct me if I am wrong, but I think we follow each other on Twitter and possibly Instagram. So it's I recognize your name. I recognize your avatar, but I am drawing a blank as to where we know each other from. So don't take it personally, because I know a lot of people online. The tweets. Gotcha. Okay. That's what I thought, Scotty. So thank you for the clarification, and thank you for being here tonight. So it's good to see some new faces in here. So, and to see some familiar faces as well. So appreciate you stopping in. But with this movie, there is another element that is presented, and I will touch upon this briefly. and you all can discuss this in the comments and everything after the stream is done and goes public and everything. But in the third act, Sid invades a television studio, and there is a broadcast, a nationwide broadcast. I mean, this is almost like early version internet broadcasting in a lot of ways, where you've got cable news and them using the internet to poll the public. And the debate is over whether or not in this movie, at this time period, should the United States close all of its borders. And Sid completely hijacks that broadcast. He kills the guest panelist in Los Angeles and turns it into his own carnival of mayhem. It's not the first time he does it either in this movie. There's a few instances where he does this as well. But I find it rather interesting that in the mid 90s they presented an element, a topic like that in a movie like this. But at the same time, I consider it rather timely considering everything that's going on in the United States as it stands. So, I'm not trying to be a wimp by any stretch by not staying in my own position on this, but I don't want to detract from the discussion I've had thus far regarding this movie. So, but honestly, I found it rather intriguing that Sid was just, he is so efficient in his mayhem, but at the same time he revels in what he does. You know, there's a scene earlier on when he's talking with his programmer, his creator. Deep fakes and AI. Yeah, Scotty, that's true. So, there's a scene earlier on in the movie where he's kind of degrading his own creator. He's like, "In your world, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, but the God who gave me life doesn't have any balls." And his programmer pretty much goes into hiding because he's afraid that Sid will come after him. And he only comes out of hiding, but he's watching because of Mission Impossible 2. Oh, okay. That's what I couldn't remember because that's been more than a minute. Sid is sitting there in the television studio and he's got the crew holding them hostage at gunpoint. And he's got this one poor guy named Ed. And once Sid takes over, the ratings just go through the roof. Literally. They're barely getting anybody to watch and participate in this debate. But once Sid takes over and launches Death TV, everybody wants to tune in. It just goes to show that at times we as a species can be attracted to some of the most disturbing things. And it's at times somewhat alarming too, because here you have a guy, a programmed serial killer, holding a guy at gunpoint with his gun in the gun in his mouth. Are you not entertained? Scotty, I get that reference and I dig it. Oh yeah, I dig it. And he's like, Ed, they want, you're so popular, they want you dead. And Sid gives the most hysterical yet disturbing viewer discretion at the start of his broadcast. He's like, but for those of you watching this, you won't be able to take your eyes off the screen. He's like, what would you like me to do? And he lists off all these horrific things, and he's like, hanging by the testicles. I imagine every man that watched that movie in theaters grabbed his balls. I know I would have. Like, hang a guy by the family jewels. Jeez, Sid. I know you're just an android, but couldn't you have a little consideration? Just a little? I mean, it would be easy to compare Sid to a Joker-like character, but I think even the Joker, in his many incarnations, might not go this far. I don't think the Joker would hang anybody by their testicles, especially a guy. Of course, I could be wrong. But this movie, if you have never seen it, Scotty, you too, pal. Appreciate you stopping in, and hope to see you next time I'm live. I'll be back live Monday night. We're going to be talking Last Action Hero, so hope to see you then. But I would encourage you, if you've never seen this movie or you haven't seen it in a long time, go revisit it. Because it is worth your time. It has a good cast. It was well written, well directed. It presents a lot of interesting ideas, and I hope that I've been able to address some of those ideas here tonight. But that also being said, this was, I feel, Hollywood's last hurrah for creativity. Because let's be honest, since the 90s going into the 2000s, lots of sequels, lots of remakes, lots of reimaginings. Some good, some bad, some just plain sucky. Originality in Hollywood seems to have gone by the wayside, but the 90s, from 1990 to 1999, Hollywood still had the ability to flex their creative muscles. And over the next 3 nights, we're going to revisit some of those movies that exemplify this. Virtuosity is one of these films. As I said, Monday night, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Last Action Hero, and wrapping up No Sequel November on Tuesday night, I'll be bringing you all a double feature review. 2 films featuring, I think, 4 of the best leading men in Hollywood, both then and now. Will Smith, Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman, and Viggo Mortensen. The films will be Crimson Tide and Enemy of the State. Oh, and there's one other I forgot to mention, John Voight. But you all know me. I don't like to belabor a point. I like to touch on it, discuss it, move on. So, we're going to start to wrap up the stream this evening. But again, I do want to thank you all who tuned in this evening. As always, make sure you leave your comments down below with anything I brought up for this review or this rewind, whichever you prefer to call it. And be sure to check out my social media accounts, both on Twitter and on Instagram. I do post there often to give notifications on what's going to be coming up next. And hope to see you all Monday night for Last Action Hero. But I do want to let you all know, for those of you that might have missed the start of this stream, I had good reason for rescheduling. My health over the last 5 months has not been the best, but I hope, Lord willing, I will start to turn a corner and I can get back to doing the things that I love. And I love this. I enjoy bringing you all these reviews and these discussions. And I normally do a anniversary stream, but this year, no anniversary stream. But I do want to say this. For those of you who were here at the beginning, back in 2019, to those of you who are here now in 2023, whether you're here or are here now, thank you for going on this ride with me. Thank you for being a part of the ambassadorial wing. Whether you're here every stream or you catch it on the replay, whether you're on the panel or you're just in the chat, know that you are always welcome here and that I appreciate and I love you all. But with that being said, as I like to say at the close of each of my streams, stay ambassadorial. Be honest, be sincere, be yourself. Never take yourself too seriously. And if you do all those things, you will always place in the ambassadorial wing. And until next time, this is the Ambassador, signing off.
Let's be friends.
Have you not?